Hey, what's up? My name is Emma. Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a little ramble through all the books I read in June. I have split this video up into sections again if you want to bounce around through the genres, but June was an okay month for me. I think as a month as a whole, it was just quite enjoyable. I spent a lot of time doing other things, hopefully, which I'll be able to tell you very soon about, but I had a lot of good reads this month. Anyway, we're just gonna go right into it. We have a little tiny dragon to help us. I think I'm just gonna start with classics because this is one of my favorite books I read this month and it is just gorgeous and beautiful. Please feel free to comment down below maybe recommendations for each other or stuff like that. I always love, you guys just make the comment section such like a glorious little garden of goodness and fun and people making friends, and it makes me so happy. So anyway, that's kind of what this first book is actually about, because I finally read The Elusive Anne of Green Gables. This book has eluded me my whole life. I don't know how it has, but I finally read it, tracked it down. It's read, it's been read, it's in my mind. The audiobook for this was phenomenal. This is a really gorgeous, cool copy. It's actually a 1969 edition that I found thrifted, and I really love it. It comes with like little funky illustrations as well. So this book was just absolutely marvelous. Like, it was honestly just there. I feel like there's no words. Like, L.M. Montgomery, I was not expecting the beautiful, like, shining, glittering prose that she throws in every single sentence. Like, she doesn't miss. She like loads up a little gun with sparkles and flowers and petals and sunshine and moonlight, and then she just fires it at the page, and every single sentence that comes out is like this glorious cottagecore aesthetic, beautiful lyrical prose of nature and of how we see nature, especially through the eyes of an extremely imaginative young girl like Anne. If you've never heard of this is a wonderful Canadian classic. We are set on Prince Edward Island over on the East Coast, which is just such a beautiful setting, and we're following Anne, who is an orphan girl, and she gets adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. After some discussion, because they were not expecting to have a young girl, they actually wanted a young boy to help out on the farm, but they are stuck with her instead. And so you follow her going about her new life in Avonlea on Prince Edward Island, and it's just actually so fantastic. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it. One of my favorite reads of the year. I cried, I laughed. I was just like, wow, let me take like what L.M. Montgomery has done with her writing of the woods and of streams and of the sky and of butterflies, and let me like paste that in front of my eyeballs when I go outside myself. Like, just honestly, the lush descriptions of nature alone are worth reading this book for, if anything else. But I think this novel just like is perfect. Like, to me, this is like a perfect novel where the author is so expert at describing her characters and making them real people, each and every one, and it's just such a rewarding book. I think this is one of the most rewarding books I've read in terms of character development, characters' relationships to one another, how the story goes and changes and interweaves with other mini stories that are brought up. This is basically a little bumble through of Anne's mishaps growing up from the time that she's about probably 11 or 12 all the way until she's going off to university. So precious, just utterly precious, like a gemstone that I've now added to the collection of books I've read, and it was just so brilliant. I would honestly recommend this to anyone of any age. I think it's beautiful. It's like a blooming flower, and there's so many more books by L.M. Montgomery that I cannot wait to read now as well. So that is the first one I read this month. Next up, keeping up with the kind of fairy tale, whimsical, nature-esque books, I listened to again The Turnip Princess and Other Newly Discovered Fairy Tales by Franz Xaver von Schönwerth. Such a fun name to say. Such a fun name to say. This was just wild. This was really interesting. So basically, these pages and pages of fairy tales were discovered in 2012 in Germany, and all of a sudden people realized that we had this whole new stock and store of fairy tales on our hands, and the world went insane, except I never heard about it. So until now. This edition was sent to me by a wonderful subscriber, so thank you so much, Michael, because this added just a little glitz and gaudiness to the fairy tale world. Also worked to kind of undo a lot of the tropes that have been built up through the Brothers Grimm collection, because of course the Brothers Grimm, like, they were very much in charge of what they chose to publish and put out, and they could just select which fairy tales they wanted out in the world. And so what Franz Xaver did, he went around Bavaria and the Upper Palatinate region, and he collected all of the stories, I believe in the 1850s, yes, from peasants, from people who were living there, just from everyone, and then he compiled them and put them all together. And they're actually very interesting to read, especially alongside the Brothers Grimm, because not a lot of these ones include all of the tropes that are so heavily infused into the Brothers Grimm, namely princesses trapped in towers, Cinderella-esque putting on shoes and stuff like that, Goldilocks. This collection shows that there are lots of fairy tales, and there might have been quite a, I want to say, like, harmful zooming in on certain tropes in the Brothers Grimm that still obviously pervade our society and our narrative and the discourse of fairy tale and stories today, when we think about Snow White or Sleeping Beauty, because in this book lots of princes fall asleep too, and they sleep much, much longer than Sleeping Beauty. There are boys who lose their shoes. There are princes stuck in towers. There are women who come to their rescue. There are women trapped in the form of animals and stuff like that. So we just see that, like, it's not only focused on this one sole thing that the Brothers Grimm have, like, popped out into the world, but it's very much like a mixture and a medley of both things. So it was really interesting to go through this. I did like it. I listened to the audiobook because it is very much like an oral tradition. The way that Franz Sauer put them down, they're very much like bullet point fairy tales. Like, each one is honestly, like, less. Some of them are only a couple pages long. Like, they're extremely short, and so you just kind of, like, go through. There's hardly any adjectives. There's no dressing up of it, which, like, I kind of missed a little bit. Like, I wanted some of that description, some of that lyricalness, like, put back in there, but he just, like, he takes you through. It is like this whistle-stop tour of all the points of the fairy tale. One moment we're in this cave and there's a bear and a turnip, and the next we're in this castle or in the belly of a dragon or stuck in a mermaid's lair and we're not really sure how we got there, which is interesting because he's just, like, more interested in telling you step by step what happens in the story, where our next question should be like, okay, and then what happened? If anything, I wish there had been a bit more description and honestly embellishment added on his part, which I think a good storyteller should be able to do. My favorite fairy tale in this one was quite a morbid one called Oferla, which is about this man who kills this elderly woman, and then he kind of frames it that she suffocated in a box, and then basically everyone is like, oh my gosh, please help me dispose of this corpse, otherwise people are going to think badly of me or think that I'm cursed. And so what he does is that he goes around, like, putting this corpse in different people's, like, a farmer's field or something like that, and then the farmer wakes up the next morning and thinks that he has poisoned or run over or killed this elderly lady, and then the farmer will pay the guy to get rid of the corpse, and then this guy will just take the corpse and peddle it off on someone else and make it look like they killed him, and he's, like, profiting off of this dead body, which was really cool and really interesting. But yeah, that is that one, and I really enjoyed it as well. The last classic I read this month was for the Dickens versus Tolstoy book club, and for June we read Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Our debate for this will be on my channel on Saturday the 10th at 2 p.m. EST, so keep your eyes open for that. We will definitely have, like, an announcement and all of that stuff, and yeah, hope to see you there. My thoughts on Oliver Twist. When I started this book, I was really enjoying it. There were a bunch of cool themes and ideas I wanted to tease out and look at and examine, and then, like, maybe almost a little before halfway through the book, all of the things I was kind of deeply interested in and the really cool weaving of sentences and Charles Dickens' humor and his, like, cleverness, it honestly dropped off for me. Like, we hit, like, the drop off in Finding Nemo, and you're not supposed to go down there. And Charles Dickens went down there and he never resurfaced. This book was honestly a very big disappointment to me. I was extremely bored in parts. I was extremely put off at different parts. Oliver Twist, we follow this young boy named Oliver. His mother gives birth to him and then passes away, and so he is left in the care of a parish house. From there you follow him getting pawned off to a coffin maker, and then from there he escapes to London, but not long after he gets kind of inducted and kidnapped essentially by this group of thieves, and then he gets swept away in different plots that they embroil him in, and he essentially is trapped within, like, this wheel of fortune of the evil of the cold, wet, shelterless London streets that Charles Dickens is trying to depict. I think he did a really great job at commenting on different parts of the justice system in here in 1837 London and England, especially calling out poverty and what causes poverty. The most famous line of Oliver Twist is, of course, please may I have some more. And so much of this book is about basic appetites and basic human needs and necessities not being able to be met because of the system that we inhabit and that these people in London inhabit. This book is also about consumption, it's about food, it's about appetites, both physical appetites for sustenance and stuff like that, but also greed and lust and money and all of that other side of appetite. I really do love having read this book and thinking about what was going on in it rather than the experience of reading it. I actually stopped reading it and started listening to the audiobook version because I just didn't care anymore. I really didn't care for any of these characters except maybe for Nancy, who is part of the Den of Thieves, but really everyone else I just did not care. Oliver himself was so not a believable character to me. I really didn't care what happened to him at all. In my opinion, this book was also unnecessarily long, and the way that Charles Dickens structures his plot and like his secrets and the twists in Oliver Twist were just not very twisty to me and very disappointing. And yeah, overall I gave this 3.5 stars, but I'm not going to say too much more about it here because I will have a video coming about this. I think I still want to do a video, and also of course we'll be talking about this in the debate on Saturday the 10th. And let's just say that I am very glad to be on Tolstoy's side because I do have a lot of things to critique about this book. So overall, would I recommend it? Maybe. I think especially if you do want to read all of Dickens' works, of course, but I don't think this is anywhere a place that I would want to start reading Charles Dickens. So that is Oliver Twist. Not very much of a twist. Another really, really good book I got to read. We're going to move into some nonfiction picks now. I picked up Miyazaki World by Susan Napier just because I saw this one on Audible and I was like, wow, this is absolutely perfect, and it was. So basically Miyazaki World is a nonfiction and Susan Napier is writing all about Miyazaki as a person. We start with a little bit of a biography on him, his life growing up, where he was working before he started Studio Ghibli, maybe some inspiration, his friends, his family, and just like life in Japan where he was living and stuff like that, which was really, really fascinating. And then from there, Susan Napier moves into all of the movies that he has directed and goes like deep into them. This is very much like this just, I don't know, this book just reminded me so much why I love English lectures and English classes and literature university stuff, because it just felt so expert. I believe Susan Napier is an academic or professor somewhere, but it just was so expertly done. I was like, yes, this feels like I'm taking a university course in Miyazaki, just because the way that she structured each movie. We start with Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and then we go all the way up until the wind rises. And we go through each movie, and she talks about different things that are occurring, different themes, maybe different symbols that we haven't unearthed, us as a viewer, and other things that I didn't even realize or see were there. She, of course, talks about the animation, the history of the film, his inspiration, how it was made, and the audience's response, maybe an international response. And of course, she just goes through the movie and so expertly, like, unravels it and talks about it and just discusses what is going on in that film and what it's doing. My favorite one was, of course, Spirited Away. I just think Spirited Away like has so much in it, and her discussion of it was just so cool. That is another one where she talks a lot about consumption and also the malaise of modernity and stuff like that. There's also a lot about food in Spirited Away. Some parts like not eating, some parts gluttony and overeating and stuff like that, which was really, really cool to discuss. And then another thing I really love in Studio Ghibli as well, which has been like the favorite thing, one of my favorite things of the year, probably my favorite thing of the year I've gotten into because I watched my first one this year, was the structures and the buildings and the architecture, because almost in every movie, I want to say, right, there's like some fixture or some home or some abode, or more often than not a castle. You can think of like Howl's Castle or the bathhouse or the family home in Totoro, or maybe it's like Osono's Bakery in Kiki or something like that, and just like seeing so much what these are doing, what these structures are doing, his fascination with castles and like buildings and stuff like that. And I loved it. I loved it so much. A fair warning, there are spoilers for every single movie in here, but of course I listened to the ones that I've already watched, and then for the ones I haven't, I listened up to like when they were going to talk about the plot and heavy elements, and then I would just skip to the end of that chapter and listen to the wrapping up of it, which was really, really good. So 4 stars, absolutely loved this. This next nonfiction was unfortunately very disappointing for just like practical reasons, because I picked up The World of Tibetan Buddhism, an overview and philosophy or something like that. It was written by the Dalai Lama, and So I picked this up. I have a little bit of history reading books about Buddhism, mostly just like not books so much talking about the history or the practice or the development or anything like that, but just books like talking about meditation and breathing techniques and, you know, just like basic stuff that anyone can benefit from. But I wanted more of an introduction, a beginner's guide to the history and just everything that Buddhism really is. And so I thought this was good because it's called an overview, and in the synopsis it says perfect for beginners. Let me tell you, I don't know what beginner I'm supposed to be to read this. I think the description and like the product info for this book is just honestly really, really off, and all of the reviews I read say the same thing. So unfortunately, this did not meet the markers at all for anything I wanted from a book like this because, let me tell you, this was not beginner level at all. This was like intermediate at best, maybe like approaching master level here. I think we spent maybe like 20 minutes on the audiobook talking about the history of Buddhism, and we really didn't go deeply into it or anything that I wanted. And then from there, he just goes off. And like, it was filled with sentences like, "You've probably heard this before. Sorry to repeat this to you again." And it's just like, I think there was like some miscommunication between the book he was writing and then the world and the way it was processed, because this was in no way for beginners. He was talking about things that made absolutely no sense to me. He would basically give you like one sentence explaining this extremely high concept. Made me really, really interested because like I want to know what you're talking about so badly. I'm so deeply interested, but I think this book should not at all be called an overview or an introduction or have the word beginner anywhere attached to it at all. So I do have a couple other books about Buddhism lined up because I'm very interested in it, but this one was just not the place to start. So that's my little review on that. This book though, wow. Okay, this next book, I'm not going to recommend it for anyone because most of the reviews and comments I've seen about this, people do not like this book, and I completely understand why, but for me, it really, really worked. It freaked me out. It was just such a good study and like my kind of book, I think, and that is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This was so good. So basically, okay, I'm so excited to talk about this one. So I'll just give you a very brief synopsis, and then I think for this one there's like a few things I want to go into and discuss about it, which I just loved so much. Okay, so in Leave the World Behind, that is exactly what we do in many different senses of the sentence. So we were following this couple and their 2 children, and they go to rural Long Island for a stay in an Airbnb to get away from the city. And then in the middle of the night, a couple shows up, knocks on their door, scares the pants off of them, and says that they are the owners of the Airbnb and that they need to stay with them because there's been a huge blackout in New York City. It appears very unsafe. No one is sure what's going on. And so with a ton of reluctance, the 2 families eventually are staying together in the Airbnb. This was just so interesting. This was a really interesting commentary on like vacation. The first few moments of this book where they're just getting to know each other and we think there's nothing more sinister than like a blackout in the city going on. It's just this like really weird environment where no one is sure like what belongs to who, what possession is, what ownership is, because we have the rightful owners of the Airbnb there, but then we have this family and this couple who have rented their home, and so this family doesn't really believe them. They think maybe they're lying. They think they're gonna like murder them or steal their stuff. And it's just like this really wacky moment where you realize that like renting someone's home or like moving from your home for a week, spending money to stay at someone else's house, you're just like, why would anyone literally ever do that? And it just seems like this mirage, this illusion, because of course the Airbnb is much more better than their own house. It's a lot fancier, it's a lot cleaner, and so they're living this like illusion for a week. They're literally paying money to have this illusion that they are rich enough to live in a house in the woods and have this glorious summer home. And it was just this really, really cool landscape of like seeing what not only like the economy and stuff has done to people, but also this weird American dream that is now kind of achievable for maybe a week if you want to spend like $2,000 to live at someone's house in the countryside. And this whole like vacation mindset and world and economy that we enter into, I really did not enjoy Rumaan Alam's writing in the beginning because I'm like, why is he writing like this? What is he doing? It's like a very strange kind of choppy writing style. For example, the the wife goes to the grocery store and she buys tons, and he spends paragraph after paragraph and he lists out every single thing that she buys, and I'm like, why is he doing this? But then like it kind of just sunk into this like extremely kind of vacation thing, where all of a sudden you have permission to like do what you want, spend as much money as you want, be as wasteful and like gluttonous as you want to be. And then that kind of tied into what this book segued into and like started to slide into. This book became so uncomfortable bit by tiny bit. It started to freak me out more and more, because this goes into a lot about climate change as well, and potentially natural disasters caused by climate change. So while they're there, they have no cell service, the internet goes out, and the last thing that they get on their phones is this like New York Times warning. So we have one that's talking about the blackout in New York City, we have one that is talking about potentially the hurricane that is coming, and then we have one that is just complete gibberish. Like it's a headline, a news headline that makes no sense, and that is all the reader is given from like the world. So not only are they now dispossessed of their home and their city and everything that they own back home, because they're now in someone's vacation house, they are now dispossessed of the world that they are able to access through their technology and through our cell phones as well, which is even more scary, because when you take someone's ability to know things instantaneously, if you take someone's way of knowing the world around them, of perceiving and getting information and understanding their surroundings and what is going on around them, when you take that away, the people that are left behind are very different. This is definitely a book that made me like not want to touch my phone ever again, not want to ever look at a screen again. It just made me like realize how scarily dependent everyone is, especially, mostly specifically like through the lens of getting information about certain things, because while they're there and they like don't have their phones, they are just reduced to like these meaningless, ability-less people who can't do normal tasks. Like they can't Google how to open a certain type of can, they can't Google what animals they see in the wild, they have no idea what is going on around them. And so that was just really, really scary and well done as well. And on top of that, they have just completely left the world physically and now through the lens of technology as well. And it kind of examines what sort of a person you are under stress and under the potential threat of disaster, because something is happening. Something is happening in this book, and I'm not going to say what. But it also tests the reader's ability to deal with that like negative capability as well, or the ability to cope with not knowing something. So we're kind of left as adrift and informationless as our characters, and it's just really, really scary. For me, this book just did an expert job at examining technology, climate change, race, relationships, consumerism and stuff like that, and it was, I think, brilliantly done. The only thing I can critique is that I really didn't care for any of the characters, and I just felt like they were more representations and just kind of there to guide along this plot that the author had in mind and that he wanted to execute, and more kind of the themes and discussions that he wanted to have, because they didn't really feel like real people. It just felt like they were reacting to this like subset of ideas that the author wanted to discuss. I didn't really care about that, because the discussion of the ideas was like so good to me, and like I'm very interested in all those things, and this book just wrapped them all up into one, and all of a sudden we're like left with these stragglers in this house on Long Island who have no idea what's going on, and they've just been dispossessed of everything, and like examining them, seeing what they do, who they are. They also run through the scenario of so many different things that could have happened. They don't know why the blackout's happening. There's a ton of talk about terrorism, a lot of talk about the American government. Maybe it's like a prank, maybe it's been climate change, maybe, like I said, it was those hurricanes that the news headlines were talking about. And so this book just like wraps everyone's like fears into one. Yeah. Anyway, this book gave me a ton of anxiety, but like it was really well done. It gave me anxiety, but I wasn't mad about it because it was just good. And yeah, definitely not a book that you want to read right before you go on vacation to a cottage in the middle of nowhere that has no internet. And that's what I've just done, because I'll be going in July, and you know I will be thinking about this book the whole time I'm there. Moving on to, unfortunately, a disappointment. This is young adult science fiction, and I decided to pick up Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This one I've heard talked about a ton on BookTube, so when I saw it at a thrift store last year, I believe, I picked it up, and then I finally listened to the audiobook this month. So, you know how like every young adult kind of fantasy book or dystopia or anything like that on the back always has that blurb for fans of the Hunger Games, or if you like the Hunger Games. How about this? None of those books I've ever read had remotely anything to do with the Hunger Games or reminded me of them at all, but Red Rising is like, for me, like it is the Hunger Games. I would pitch this book as the Hunger Games on Mars. For me, that was like a huge problem because I really enjoyed the opening of this book, and then the after the first 80 pages, I was just kind of done, spaced out. I didn't care. So if you've never heard of this, this is the first book in a very long series, I believe. We're following this man named Darrow, and he lives on Mars, and he is a red because humanity has been split up into factions of different colors, and so we have red on the bottom as the lowest faction. And so the reds work on Mars, and they are basically like in mines on Mars. So when Darrow finds out that his world has been pretty much a lie, he is brought above to the surface of Mars, and from there he works to infiltrate the infamous Gold faction, who are the most powerful, and they basically rule over the whole show in this world. Like I said, I really enjoyed the first like 100 or 80 to 100 pages, but then literally after that the whole rest of the book just became the Hunger Games, which I really didn't enjoy. On top of that, I really did not like Darrow, our protagonist. I found him just very unsympathetic, very arrogant. I didn't like him as a character at all, and so it just made everything that you're supposed to be rooting for in this book basically mean nothing to me. I didn't enjoy any of the characters. On top of that, a lot of this book is inspired by ancient Rome, especially when we get to like the Hunger Games bit, because everyone is put into this kind of arena and they go through some tests and stuff like that. I do love ancient Rome and I think it's really cool, but it just felt very unoriginal to me, and at this point I've seen it done so many times that I just really didn't care anymore, and I would love to see something more original being done rather than just copying ancient Greece or ancient Rome and that kind of society atmosphere deal. One good thing I can say about this is that I did enjoy the writing. I thought for the style, the writing was like very sharp, very precise, very blunt, and really did show you like the horrors of this world, and especially of this like ancient Rome inspired hierarchy and government. On the whole, I really did not enjoy this. Like I said, I found it quite boring, honestly, when we got to the arena portion of this book, which takes up most of it, and I know a lot of people have commented saying that the books get better as they go along, so I think I would be maybe potentially interested in reading the next one, especially because we'll be back kind of in like society and like learning more about the world. This book definitely has a lot of things in it as well to follow and to keep up with, different groups of people, and just a lot of different fantasy. I feel like needlessly and endlessly complicated things as well, but that is Red Rising. I think I gave it a very generous 3 stars. And finally, I read Sailor Moon Volume 2. I gave this 5 stars. I feel like when you just enjoy something so much, I cannot give this any less than 5 stars. I think once I read more from the series, this is my first time reading through it, I would love to do more of like a deep dive into Sailor Moon and do like a whole video about it, because I just think it's honestly brilliant. I love the artwork, I love the story, I love the characters. It's so nostalgic to me, it's so funny to me, it's just like everything I want. I really think it's well done, and I just love it so much. I do think it reads a bit young, but like I said, that doesn't really matter for me at all. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to continuing with this because so much happened in the second volume. So that was the last one I read this month. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what your favorite book of the month was down below, and I guess I'll see you very soon in my next video. I think I'm gonna go enjoy the rainy day, and I will speak to you very soon. Ciao.